Kench banned away, Elise to follow. But one thing that we did see in patch 7.13 right at the end was sort of a big shift in the jungle priority.
Yeah, you can see how many different junglers are very prevalent in the meta right now. Already today we've seen the Cho'Gath, the Kayn, Warwick also coming out, Sejuani being extremely prevalent as well, and it just opens up to such a wide champion pool in that jungle position. Trick usually favors the tanky style, whereas Jankos prefer those early game junglers. I think both can be viable in the current meta. The question is, which will be able to execute better?
Absolutely have to find out. Zach remains high priority, Elise as well, and the bans at least. Jace, one of the kind of the newer bans that we're seeing pretty consistently taken off the board, we have to assume due to lethality, but not a pick that we have seen on stage yet in patch 7.14. Cho'Gath, interestingly enough, going to be the final ban from G2.
Now, Jankos has been playing a bunch of different champions recently in solo queue. One of the things that we did see over in North America was the Maokai as well. Don't know how really strong it is. It has very little success over in North America, but it is something he's been practicing. And I do wonder whether or not he brings it out. Meanwhile, G2, rather than put any huge focus on the support role, looks like they're looking for top lane, try and get Expect on something that he can have some comfort on.
Taking their time debating what they want here. Countdown dropping lower and lower. Caitlyn is available. They are going to take it. Did get some attack speed growth nerfs this patch, so level to level, she will not be able to attack quite as quickly, but still looks like a high priority for G2 as H2K now have the opportunity to lock in 2 fresh picks of their own. If it wasn't Odoamne, I would be so excited about this Rammus, but this man hovers it every time.
He loves Rammus top lane, but you know, it's Coach Prolly. They gotta go meta. Something like the Gragas makes a lot more sense. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like an early Braum for Chei as well. Rakan could also work, but things like Tahm, Kench are still available. Some of the support picks that we haven't talked much about are the introduction of Tarek this patch. There's always the possibility of him making his way.
I love the introduction.
Freedom.
He wasn't a champion until this patch.
Yeah. But someone that has been making his way back into the meta on this patch.
And interesting enough, Varus has been chosen as an option into the Caitlyn. We'll see how that matchup fares, but kind of a defensive AD carry, works well into pretty much any composition. Nothing too fancy coming out here from H2K, as you mentioned, probably with his eyes on the meta. And G2, they're baiting us. They must have heard about the Maokai, but now trying to figure out what they want to do. We'll see if they want to match the jungle here, but Gragas technically a flex pick as well.
It looks like they're just going to go for a safe bottom lane. Very, very reliable. You can't really go wrong with this matchup. It's very difficult to get engaged upon. You have extremely powerful siege. I think that it's just very safe from G2. They could look to lock in their jungler right now if they so wanted to. I feel like that right now they could do with something like an engage coming from the jungle with Sejuani taken off the board. I feel like maybe they could go for the Rek'Sai for a little bit of early game impact, but the Kha'Zix always has that strong scaling, especially with the introduction of Duskblade. They can also have that earlier spike too.
Kha'Zix will be the final lock-in, headed into the jungle in the hands of Trick. Now, historically, this has been a very good pick for him. 4 wins, 0 losses over the course of the summer split. Now, it's curious to see what it's going to be able to do here in the early game. We can expect it to be matched up to Gragas. Not confirmed yet, but all this priority outside of the mid lane does mean that Febiven is going to get a chance to pick up the LeBlanc here. But he's playing with our hearts.
Don't get baited, come on. He wouldn't blind pick a Z here. Look, that would be very risky.
You say that, but it's so different from solo queue, because every solo queue game is like everybody getting one shot by some fed guy with Duskblade, but now it's all about tanks and competitive, and I just don't know what to expect, Vedius.
Well, what you can expect is a reliable engage from H2K. They have a bunch of options already with the Gragas, his body slam, his ultimate, the Varus ultimate too, the flanking options from Tahm Kench. Great way to just make things happen in the mid to late game. And I know, having spoken with Odo, this is something that the team really values, giving a bunch of playmaking options to as many people as possible so that you're not reliant on a single individual being that big superstar that can suddenly make stuff happen for your team.
And the bans, they're going to remain mid lane focused, but I like what you brought up about that playmaking opportunities. Now, Chei, not a man to shy away from those opportunities himself. I like that he got the Tahm Kench, and I'm a bit surprised to see G2 not prioritize it for Mithy. They had the option and instead opted for the Braum here.
You always have to be careful early locking in Tahm Kench because there are a few answers to it, and I think that with the Braum, you just give something safe. Like Tahm Kench and Braum, both fine, both very strong supports, really rise in value, especially once Flash is off the board. So mid lane line focus going to continue out from both teams. There's still a lot of room for what could go mid and could go top lane. It looks like that most of the S tier mid laners are taken off the board. Now you're looking at things like the Taliyah potentially rising in value, but we know how strong things like Zed are into the Taliyah, along with a bunch of other assassins. So it could be a little riskier if they tried to go for a blind pick. Corki is a fairly safe option, especially with the poke that the H2K do have.
So even with 3 mid lane bans, there's still an abundance of options up and available. H2K are going to opt to blind pick their top laner. Gnar in the hands of Odoamne. It does confirm that Gragas will be going into the jungle, but G2 not going to get the luxury of counter picking in the mid lane.
Cheeky hover.
Cheeky hover. I mean, I feel like we break the rule, but I feel like on this patch you're never 100% sure and you want to talk about it. I don't think so, folks.
No. But that was the mid lane that we were talking about in terms of raising in priority. When Ori, Syndra, and LeBlanc all taken off the board, Taliyah really becomes the next power pick. This is the window. This is where you're most likely going to see a Zed in the mid lane if you are going to see one. Febiven could also go for something like an Ahri, not commonly picked in Europe. Something like the Cassio is typically considered more of an answer towards the Taliyah. But there's always that option. If they want to try and go for 1-3-1 with the Gnar, then they could force something like an Echo or maybe even the Zed. The only thing you have to worry about is your high AD damage.
I feel kind of bad for Expect. He keeps getting this Jarvan picked for him, and it is a great champion once you get out of lane, but he is never picked into a winning lane matchup. Nope. This man is set up to suffer, and this is something G2 have talked about. They said, we're willing to sacrifice individual players for the greatness of the team, but right now in the last couple games, it has been a lot of sacrificing Expect. But now H2K are finally going to lock in the Kassadin, as predicted, one of the counter options, or one of the solid options, into Taliyah. And maybe not quite the explosive lethality mid lane matchup some people might have expected.
But it's a really rough matchup for Taliyah in the middle lane. Once we actually get into game, we can talk a little bit more about it. But you can see the composition from H2K, very much 1-3-1. They have a bunch of engaged tools. They scale extremely well. They have good team fighting. Just a very classic H2K comp, very well-rounded. G2, very similar vein. They have decent team fighting, arguably a little weaker than H2K because of this mid lane matchup, but they too have good scaling. They have really strong siege with the poke that you get from Taliyah and the Caitlyn. And with Kha'Zix, I would say they have a little bit stronger of an early game, depending on how well Trick can do in the jungle.
And we've seen Trick snowball massive leads. And I think when we look at these two compositions, the major difference, it feels like the sieging potential on the side of G2 versus the 1-3-1 potential on the side of H2K. You have that Gnar who can be a split pusher. You have that Kassadin. They both can be powerful in team fights. We see them so often go into the side lane. Head over to Twitter, folks, at LOL Esports. Hashtag G2 win or hashtag H2K win. We heard what Rawcat thought, Wadid, Hjarnan, and Foxy. We heard what Henning thought, and Shock spoke for Deficio. So, let us know what you think.
Yeah, definitely going to be a close series. Whose slump will end? H2K pretty inconsistent. G2, they're looking to become consistent themselves. Let's see which one can pull out the first win as we jump into H2K versus G2.
Game one, folks. No crazy new picks coming out yet. Both teams reminding us a little bit of patch 7.13, but the new item's still present. We'll have to see what each side wants to go for. G2 on the blue side, H2K on the red. And you mentioned Trick, early success. Where does he set his sights, Vedius? What is the lane that you try to shut down?
I mean, typically you want to try and shut down a Kassadin as much as you can. It is very difficult, especially with the Taliyah Kha'Zix lane, because you don't really have any hard crowd control to lock him down and then insta-kill him. But if you can put a lot of pressure down early on, it's a great avenue to just deny him, delay the late game spike that Kassadin is so desperately working towards. The big issue that PerkZ is going to have is during the laning phase. It's just super, super rough because Febiven, he's going to walk up, he's going to Q, and then he's going to leave. And it's very difficult for the Taliyah to trade back because Febiven just has to stand behind his minions and be like, haha, countered. And in the event that one of them does hit, he also has a magic shield to boot. So add to the fact that he has all that sustain and a teleport, it's going to be very difficult to force Febiven out of lane. The best you can do is just push, 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 because he doesn't really have that kind of wave.
And a TP to back it up as well means Febiven, even if he is pushed under that tower, even if he does maybe lose a trade once or twice, the minion wave isn't there to block from, it feels like he's going to be pretty safe to farm up in this lane if it is left to that 1v1. So we have to see what's going to happen. PerkZ, This does spot the ward out, and now the team is moving into the jungle. Looks like it's going to be the cheeky Taliyah start we have not seen in a while. Just going to try to start with at least one of these creeps. A small XP advantage.
I'm taking them all, Drakos. All right, that's
going to start with 3 of these Raptors.
Okay, so just wanted to talk about, the level 2 gank from Trick in mid already.
Febiven, level 1, flash forward. That's so aggressive. Febiven getting taken low. Little bit of damage back up from PerkZ, but no summoners burn.
Wow.
I mean, if you don't use flash, it's not a very good summoner spell,
we're
right?
like, yo, Trick, we've heard that Febiven and Jankos, probably the best jungle mid synergy in the LCS right now, and Trick is like, you what?
I feel like he missed the synergy part of that, because that was literally just Trick. He's like, we're going to get the best synergy. PerkZ, you stay back there, I'm going in.
Well, he goes in, he uses the flash, realizes he doesn't need it early. Jankos, very unlikely to try and invade him. But he does get a chunk of damage down, will force some of the health pots out from Febiven. He will now be forced to play back, but he doesn't get any summoner spells out from him. So just, really it was just a pressure play. Let's see if Trick pays for it later on into the game.
Knows, Trick, is he going to pay for it now?
He's fine.
He's good. All right. Well, Trick knows Gragas maybe not going to be as big of a threat in the early game, not going to throw down as much pressure, so tries to make the most of his very early game, I suppose you could argue, by forcing the gank in mid lane, but pressure just going to go down onto Kassadin, however, heals up off the refillable. No major impact from that yet. We'll have to see if Trick will be punished for burning the flash or what will actually come from that play. Good exchange from PerkZ. Now we look at the top lane. We talked about this lane matchup earlier. Things, they're fine for Expect, but definitely not where he wants to.
I mean, in terms of farm right now, he's absolutely fine, right? The best you can do is just sit under tower and just practice last hitting, because there's very rarely an occasion where you can trade onto the Gnar. The thing about Jarvan is he's an all-in champion. So if you go in, you don't really go back out again, and what Gnar is really effective at punishing is when you close the gap on him and you try to run away because of all the bonus movement speed, because of the slows that he has. He's just very good at punishing you every time you try to retreat. So the best thing for Expect is to just accept the fact that he can't do much in this lane, get as much farm as he can, and scale towards the mid and late game, where he'll have a lot more value in these mid-game team fights.
And I'm curious to see if G2 want to put any pressure on this lane whatsoever, or if they are happy to concede it, as you mentioned, just let him get that last hitting practice, because Jarvan, one of the few characters in this game who feels like he has that gank assist, has some CC to start it up for Kha'Zix to do the damage. Have to see if that's the option. Mithy throwing down a bit of vision. Doesn't look like he's going to spot Jankos out. The ping does go down, so the vision did spot him on the Gromp.
One of the things... Ooh, another gank mid.
Knocked back. That's actually bad news for Febiven. Is he going to have to burn the flash? No. Oh, does burn the flash, rather.
Beautiful setup from PerkZ and Trick. A return gank to the middle lane. This time, they get what they wanted. The flash is now gone for Febiven. We talked about which lanes Trick was going to invest in early. Well, mid lane was the one we wanted him to see him doing it, and he's doing a fantastic job so far. Great knockback from PerkZ to force the flash out for Febi. Level 4, he's already forced to go back. He's already forced to use the teleport. Has to come back with a boot and corrupting potion, and this is where you delay his spike. You delay the Rod of Ages and slow down the Kassadin scaling.
Interesting to see what exactly the next focus is going to be. I think G2 may just want to continue camping this mid lane. They finally burned that flash, even if the earlier gank wasn't successful. Trick's flash will be up shortly, and may be difficult to dive that Kassadin as he approaches level 6, but you can see PerkZ so confident in this mid lane.
I am so impressed with how many of these knockbacks that he is landing, because it is super difficult. Once Kassadin gets level 6, it will be a little harder. You will note that Febiven can look to trade more aggressively onto the Taliyah once he has that extra bit of mobility. Typically, dashes will hurt you when Taliyah lays down the minefield, but he has a blink, so he'll just teleport over them, and it's not as effective as, say, it would be against someone like Illusion.
You're not killing yourself like a LeBlanc would by leaping forward. Now, usually mid lane matches very often decided by the junglers. We've seen Trick repeat ganks this time into the mid lane. Hasn't been the same case for Jankos on this Gragas. Not really making the same mark.
Yeah, something that we wanted to highlight back in their series versus Roccat was how early impacting Jankos really was. Now, we did have champions like Zac and Lee Sin, slightly different in terms of their playstyle, but he was everywhere. He was having so much presence during the laning phase, helping getting his laners ahead, and that allowed them to just play as aggro as they wanted to build those early leads and snowball up against Roccat. But this time round, Trick is the one exerting all that early pressure. Gragas not being that level 6, struggling to kind of match it, but he is doing well in the farm. So once he hits that level 6 mark, it'll be good to see from him if he can try and look to make a play in some of the other lanes.
And there's been pressure on Trick to perform in the early game to set PerkZ up for success. As you mentioned, Kassadin kind of this ticking time bomb. Eventually he's going to be a threat. Eventually you will not be able to 1v1 him, especially as an AP champion. We'll see as Jankos approaches that level 6, if he can force one of those ganks into the mid lane, if he can relieve some of the pressure that's been placed down on Febiven. But gotta say, Febiven, despite all the attention he's been receiving, still at a pretty decent CS margin. 7 creeps down. Yep. Not a bad spot to be.
It's getting worse though. I love the way PerkZ is punishing me underneath the tower. It's so great to see a Kassadin suffering during the laning phase, because too many times in the LCS I've just seen these Kassadins get free lanes, and it just makes me sad because his weakest point is his laning phase. And usually we see him picked into the Corki, he just constantly wins out on trades, but you can mitigate that if you just keep ganking him, and Trick has done a great job of recognizing this and just trying to put Febiven behind to allow his mid laner to succeed, and so far PerkZ is doing a great job in the early game.
Trick gonna use some fancy footwork to pressure out the red buff. Jankos now level 6. See where he puts that attention, where that explosive cask is going to go. Looks like he's just checking out on the dragon, wants to make sure Kha'Zix is not free to solo that one up. We see so frequently kind of the evolved claws being just such an easy way to solo out those objectives.
Yeah. He will decide to go for that, and one of the things that we briefly touched on early on was who will end their slump? How is the consistency issue for both these teams going to be resolved? Because G2, they haven't looked good for the first half of the split. They went 1-5 at Rift Rivals. A lot of question marks around, will they return to form? Will they become this consistent powerhouse in Europe? And after last week's performance, we were excited, but we weren't entirely sure how they would do. Now for H2K, this is a team that you always put your trust in, and then they go down. And then you go, H2K, we're kind of disappointed, we don't have faith, and then all of a sudden they go back up. And it's always so up and down their performance that you just, it's very difficult to have faith in them. And so we're looking at both these teams and we wonder who will be the more consistent, who can finally end that slump streak and demonstrate that they are truly a top team in Europe.
And right now, H2K vying for the top of Group B, pretty easily going to have it after Unicorns lost earlier today. But we want to see that consistency, as you mentioned. And, you know, I asked Febiven in an interview earlier in the split, you know, you guys kind of have this reputation of chokers, because when the pressure is on, when we see the team and we're like, yes, H2K is the top team in Europe, everything seems to fall apart so consistently. But winning here against G2, holding that top spot at Group B, taking down former Kings of Europe, if we still want to call them that at this point in the split, has to feel good, has to set up the confidence coming into playoffs, especially as they've all but secured a spot at this point.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this narrative is because typically we do see H2K have a huge impact in the early game. We usually try to see them set that up, and right now, this is the PerkZ show. He's the guy that has full control over the early game, and it's where we saw him have the most success in previous weeks. You can just see from his stats how well he was able to perform in their series versus Spice, specifically in Game 2, where he got that early lead on LeBlanc and roamed around on the map. He has a Taliyah right now. He has the ability to affect these side lanes, but Jankos is coming mid.
I told that thought. Good seismic shove to pull him back. Kha'Zix is busy soloing the Infernal Drake. Is he going to go for that instead of trying to assist PerkZ? They're all trapped in the pit now. Trick's going to get it. He's going to flash over. They're going to make it out with both their lives and a dragon. A lot of resources committed for H2K, but not going to find the prize.
And PerkZ, he just wanted to run to his jungler. He thought, if I can get the help, Febiven will overcommit. We can turn around and we can punish him. They saw Chei come from the river as well, and they realized there's nothing we can do in this situation. We just have to evacuate. Febiven does flash. PerkZ gets away with his life. Trick has to flash too, but they get the objective that they wanted.
And we are now seeing more pressure from Jankos, but it doesn't result in anything this time. And H2K, full knowledge of that Infernal Drake going down, chose instead to put their pressure on the mid lane. Mithy, though, is going to have to be careful. Cask is up and available for Jankos. Will get knocked back into the team. Knockdown comes in, but Mithy is going to drop first blood for H2K.
Good punish from Jankos and Chei. They realize that Mithy is sticking around too long. He wants to proc that passive so they can get in range to jump to Zven. He does not try to flash the barrel. He ends up giving away his life. And now the bottom lane of H2K have relieved some of the pressure that this Caitlyn and Braum were exerting for the majority of this game.
Good spot to be for H2K as well. We can see exactly how this unfolded, but sometimes a little risky to face check these brushes. Not a lot to say against the level 7 Gragas. Yeah. Second that Unbreakable was gone. Pretty free to just knock him back into the team. It's a good ult for Mithy, but unfortunately too little too late.
Just a lack of respect, really, from Mithy. He wasn't expecting the chain CC. Nuclear did a really good job of locking him up once he was knocked into the rest of the team. So for the time being, H2K did get this early lead. Now the question is, can they hold on to it and snowball it? The rest of the lanes, Still going fairly evenly. Slight advantage in the top lane for H2K. G2, they're just trying to gain vision around this river area. But there is no dragon to take. Rift Herald could be a big point of contention. And I wonder if H2K look for a swap fairly soon. That bottom tower is going to go down. But with the Blade of the Ruin King already completed on Nuclear, maybe they feel confident enough to hold that 2v2.
Keep our eyes where the big macro move is going to come out. Chei with the Abyssal Voyage as well, but Nuclear has been spotted. Trick waiting in the brush. He's going to throw down a bit of damage on the Nuclear. That is so much coming out. Trying to save the day. Blast Cone out. I got hype, I got excited, but at the end of the day, you're not going to kill two champions as a level 8 Kha'Zix with 0 kills.
He has the heal on Nuclear though, so a small win will allow G2 pressure in the mid lane as well. It looks like they're just going to quake a very quick rotation. Maybe even siege this down, but with Jankos here, they have more than enough wave clear to hold the line. You can see all the workaround in the lane. God damn, it's so frustrating as a Taliyah when you just can't use your Q ability.
No, you can, you just get one.
Yes, it's kind of like
and half the cooldown, Vedius. Isn't that great?
So typically you can see that G2 very good at taking first towers, or have been so far throughout the regular season. H2K not too far behind though, only in 3rd place. So both these teams, very huge investment in trying to get that early objective as soon as they can.
Keeping our eyes as we go into the mid game, one thing we wanted to talk about more in this series is why were both of these teams slumping? And one of the things we saw was lack of consistency across G2 lanes. G2 themselves brought up these selfish drafts, and I feel like ever since that Splice series, that's really no longer been an issue for the team.
Well, I've been really impressed so far with how things have been going, and so far in this early laning phase, it's been fairly safe. It's been that macro. It's what Zven exactly called, right? You wanted a little bit more of a bloodbath, Drakos, but unfortunately, that's not what these teams are interesting. It's all about the scaling, the team fighting, the ability to ward and play around vision. Good League of Legends.
All right, fair. Always good to see a smart macro game. We had a bloody game last series, so slightly different style this time around. Now, we mentioned Expect was eventually going to get out of this lane, eventually be able to have team fight impact. Cannot fight the Gnar, but can fight other people, yet it's been trapped here for a very long time. Almost 14 minutes, no towers dropping yet, only a single kill. Is there a break point in this game, or are both teams just content to continue extending the laning phase?
I'd just love to see PerkZ try and make a roam down to the bottom side of the map. Or top side works too.
Or the top side, Odoamne. He's going to hop, but it's slightly interrupted now, locked in the cage. Expect can't 1v1, but can definitely 2v1. Gets the back from PerkZ. That's the kill back for G2.
Just as we tried to talk about it, PerkZ acts upon the level 11. You have the ulti, the ability to roam around the map. Odo is overextended top. He doesn't even flash, and now Febi takes a bit of harass, but he will walk out. Great roam from PerkZ. Maybe he could have gone to the bottom side, try and force that early tower. Again, though, because Nuclear got that early kill, don't feel as confident to try and make the same sort of play down the bottom side of the map. So G2, they get themselves a return kill.
Also, risky going into the Tahm Kench. Do not want to overcommit into the Devour. Jankos continuing to lay down very aggressive vision into the G2 jungle, is getting mitigated to a certain degree, but you can see both teams actually pretty proactive in protecting their laners with vision. But we'll watch this play one more time and exactly what happened to Odoamne.
So you can see here, Odo just continuing his push. He feels absolutely fine, but his Mega Gnar just runs out. So Odo, he's trapped inside the cage. He realizes that if he flashes out, that's going to give the opportunity for PerkZ to knock him back. So he just accepts his fate, loses his life, and he's going to hold his summoner spell for a later date. And this will relieve the pressure a little bit more for Expect. So now you actually have 3 decent matchups for G2 because of the constant push from PerkZ in mid. You have the pressure in bottom lane because of a Caitlyn. And now that Jarvan has completed the Black Cleaver, along with the Ninja Tabai, he's going to feel a little bit more confident trading into the Gnar as well.
Maybe still not the best matchup, but definitely in a much better spot than they once were. Interesting, we're seeing Jankos go for the Runic Echo still. Cinderhulk, kind of the big talk of the town with the buffs to Bomby Cinder, the cost reduction, but it looks like he still wants to focus at least a little bit on that early damage.
Now remember, win conditions here for H2K, very much focused on making sure the Febiven doesn't fall too far behind. Looking at a possible collapse coming out from H2K.
Abyssal Voyage coming forward, PerkZ gonna flash back, cask over, but Trick's gonna dodge it.
Oh, Odo TP in as well, so that's going to leave expecting the top side. H2K, they tried to force a play, couldn't make anything happen.
Whiff on the Gnar, but now 5 members strong of H2K around the Dragon Pit. Febiven's running right back to the mid lane, but it looks like H2K not looking to give up a second Infernal Drake in this game, especially when it could be all about scaling. Trick gonna run forward, not gonna get the steal. Still looking for the aggressive play, though. Will get locked up. Single person knockup from Mithy, but he's gonna continue. There's the expect on the backside moving forward. That's gonna be the Cataclysm. Suddenly Zven is here as well, dishing out the damage. Kill down onto Chei. No one left to protect Nuclear if he goes forward, but PerkZ is the one who has to be scared. He may just get popped. Heal comes out to save him. Looking for the disengage. Odoamne gonna get one. He's about to go mega. Will he go over the wall? No flash means they have to back off, but it's just the 1-for-1.
Great team fight from both sides, but overall victors are H2K. They come out healthier. They feel confident to return to the lanes and defend from the pushing bot of G2. And H2K, not only did they get the dragon, but they will in fact lose the bot tower, but they've responded by making a play over in the mid.
Looks like it will just be the 1-for-1 tower trade in the end. Tower first blood in the favor of G2, but H2K gonna just about even it up. Almost a 1K advantage for G2. Not gonna be too massive, but does get them started if they can keep this ball rolling.
So bear in mind, the Taliyah flash was burnt earlier on, but G2, they feel confident to try and force the fight. They've got the collapse down onto Chei because this is actually now a 5v4 before Febiven joins. And at this point, G2, they just want to disengage, but PerkZ's positioning is not ideal. He sticks around a little too long. That allows the rest of H2K to get enough CC down onto him, and then Odo comes in for the cleanup kill. The rest of G2, they're then just forced to retreat because all of their resources were burnt onto Chei, who's not really the target that you want to be trying to shut down.
Map now resets. G2 putting their bot lane in the mid lane. H2K going to mirror the same strategy. Mid laners have headed top. Top laners have headed bot. Everybody has swapped around. And the laning phase continues.
Yes, the laning phase continues, but this is big for H2K because now they've got Febi out of the middle lane. They still hold on to their mid lane tower. Nuclear and Chei can hold on to it, which means that in terms of map control, very heavily in their favor. Because it's now even harder for G2 to extend their vision line deeper into the H2K half of the jungle, whereas H2K are feeling even more confident about trying to do it. Regardless though, look at the goal difference. G2 still in control, largely because of the CS advantage that Zven has been able to build up for himself.
And we see H2K in past weeks, they've been all over the place. This is part of the reason why we've labeled them as an inconsistent team. But the thing to note is, in this game, it doesn't feel like as big of a deal that they've fallen a little bit behind in gold. They feel much more in control than in some of those weeks where they were put at larger deficits.
Yeah, this goal graph really references what we talked about in terms of the inconsistencies, as you were saying, Drakos. And we just want to see an H2K where they either have a straight line somewhere. Because H2K are just such a difficult team to trust, because whenever they look good, they fall down, and then when you don't expect them to perform, they then suddenly perform again. So
if you're an H2K fan, continuously tell them that you expect very little, and they will continue to perform at the top.
Exactly. So the fact that the fan vote was actually in their favor earlier on, probably not looking so good based on results-based analysis.
I love it. That's the classic sports fan. Look, man, historically, these guys, week 7, games against G2, always perform. Just saying. Something about week 7. Expect. Looking to keep week 7 getting aggressive. That's going to be the double ult from Mithy. Now the Weaver's Wall on the backside. Nuclear's going to be in trouble if he's not careful. PerkZ getting off a little early. But not what he wanted. The pull back. G2 eager to force a fight, but H2K doing what they can to stop the engage from happening.
Everybody walks away with their lives, but I love the proactive plays coming out from both teams. H2K utilizing their TP to not only get a flash out of PerkZ, but to set up for the dragon earlier on and make a fight happen. Here, G2 recognizing that Chei does not have flash available. They engage onto the mid, they use all their roaming capabilities to collapse down, hoping to get a kill. Unfortunately, they don't find anything. You can just see the skill of both these teams, always wary, always showing respect to their opposition, but still trying to make stuff happen rather than just having this slow, long, drawn-out game where one team fight can decide it all.
Yeah, just threatening H2K, hoping to catch H2K off guard, but they do a great job of disengaging. And once again, we look at the scaling, we look at Kassadin, we look at this Gnar, and it feels like, to a certain degree, it is in favor of H2K. Caitlyn on the opposite side, definitely a terror. Taliyah as well, but Jarvan not quite the greatest late game champion, and we'll see how these fights go as we get later and later into the game.
One thing that does concern me for G2 is the fact that they actually have no exhaust for Febiven, and they have no real way to lock him down because he has so much mobility. Ideally, you want stuns or knockups or silences or just hard crowd control to keep him stationary so that you can shut him down. But the Jarvan ultimate, the Braum passive,
yeah, the Jarvan ultimate feels terrible against the Kassadin. He just leaves. He just leaves the circle. Exactly. He does not want to fight you, but the Braum passive, I like that you brought that up because it turns every auto attack into the point and click stun you want against Kassadin. But even then, Mithy has to be in a position to hit the Kassadin.
And you need the Kassadin to stand still long enough that you can hit him 4 times.
All right, so we're kind of connecting the dream scenario where Kassadin is going to get stunned, but the bottom line is it's very difficult. We're going to have to see what G2 want to do, how they execute.
And that's what makes it so exciting too, right? Because Kassadin is always a difficult champion to teamfight against, but G2's win condition is very much fighting. They have a great 5v5 comp, they have a great ability to siege, but H2K is splitting them up right now, forcing PerkZ and Expect to be on the side lanes. So that's why they need to utilize this TP and the ulti from PerkZ to try and make these plays mid, force H2K to come to them so they can have the fights that they want.
Dragon spawning shortly, 14 seconds away. Maybe a fight that G2 want. We'll see if H2K want to opt into it. They want to use this as the arena. G2 definitely issuing the challenge as they clear out the vision. H2K are well aware that this is what is in G2's sights. It looks like they may not even put the priority here. Happy to give this one up, not looking to taste the risk of forcing a fight.
A lot of respect being shown there from H2K, but also they didn't quite have the vision set up. So instead they wanted to use this opportunity to get deep vision down topside, make sure that Febiven was safe as he took the tower, and the gold equalizes once more. So very steady, very slow game from both teams. It's exciting. It's culminating in one big fight.
And the thing is it's not like the scaling is crazy in favor of one side, right? Kassadin and Gnar definitely very scary. But there's a Caitlyn on the other side. There's a Taliyah, and I feel like normally when we see a Kassadin, I'm like, if this team does not win by the time Kassadin hits level 16, the game is done. But that doesn't feel like the case this time around. I
also quite like the fact that Trick went Black Cleaver rather than the Duskblade. Do feel that item is very much more towards snowballing rather than playing towards the team. Black Cleaver, the armor shred, way more valuable in team fights. So this could be an engage from H2K.
Engage coming out. Nuclear throwing down the ultimate. Mithy throwing the ult behind him. He's going to get knocked back to the team. Mithy now in trouble. Has to flash out to safety. Both teams playing so cautious. But H2K
really wants to commit. As I cut you off there briefly, Drakos, because H2K, though, they're still in the power play. G2, very risky to try and go for that kind of a face check, even though they will still be able to make their way into the river and get this vision down. Baron now becomes a big point of contention for both these teams. Nobody's in the bottom lane. Well, regardless, Expect making his way now to the bottom lane as Odo continues to put pressure on. So all these outer towers destined to fall relatively soon.
Not going to get any rage from hitting the tower either, so pretty easy for Odo to keep up that pressure. We'll get 50% of its life. That is the boon that H2K get for forcing a bit of a skirmish in the mid lane. But the calm game just continues on, and we were expecting it to be all about jungle mid, and it kind of was.
It kind of was.
For the first 10 minutes, but I feel like we've made it past the point. It's no longer about individual laners. It feels like it's much more of that team game, and you brought up Jankos. Bringing more, team utility to the table, bringing more engage options, can start things. Whereas Trick, maybe some opportunities from some of those Kha'Zix solo kills, but definitely not going to be the fight starter that H2K
And this is really good from PerkZ. You guys at home playing solo queue, take note of what he just did. Because he pushed a wave and he was like, huh, I have no vision in my side of the map. I have no idea where Jankos is. I have no idea where Chei is. It's super easy for them to flank behind me. So I'm just going to walk back to my turret. I don't need to be that far pushed up in the lane. Oh, look. The entire top side of my blue jungle is warded. And now Odo...
hold that thought because Hyper does a lot of damage to tanks. And Odoamne, well aware of that fact, Expect not giving him the respect he deserves. And if H2K were looking for an opportunity to start to open this game up, they may have just found it. That's definitely the tower in favor of H2K. But what else are they going to be able to get off of this?
Odoamne finding that solo kill, demonstrating the strength that this Gnar has in the matchup. He gets himself the frozen melee. Extremely difficult for Expect to disengage from the mini Gnar once he has that consistent slow being applied to you. Getting that solo kill on the side lane is absolutely massive for H2K because now they have the turret advantage. They have full control over the map. They can set up vision wherever they please. And even though it will likely be towards the Baron area, we now know for sure Expect he cannot hold this lane in the 1v1. But is he even going to be able to hold his own against the Kassadin? Picked up the Lich Bane now, reaching that late game point. G2, their proactivity has slowed down significantly compared to what was happening in the first 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah, given that Trick engaged at 2 minutes, I think definitely a different pace of game than what we saw earlier on. But Good use of the Mega Gnar. Nice timing, we have to say, on this engage from Odoamne. Procs the Frozen Mallet before the flag and drag comes out, so expect slowed even as he exits that dash. And if you've ever played against Gnar, you've definitely experienced this. This is the rundown.
Yep. It sucks for expect, but really love the way in which Odoamne did utilize his ultimate, just maximizing it as much as possible, so he gets that CC, is able to begin the chase, and he is able to get himself the solo kill. So good recognition there. Looks like he's working towards that Gargoyle stone plate, but a roam coming from Taliyah mid.
For it, are they going to go for the engage here? Weaver's Wall available. Summoner spells up, 3 members under the tower. PerkZ poking out from the side, though. H2K now going to know that he is there. Already spotted him on the control ward, however, so explains why the team is playing back.
And this is how you play 1-3-1. Fantastic vision setup, constantly coming out from H2K. Every time G2 try and go on out to the lanes, look at Chei and Jankos, moving together, regaining vision. Everything that G2 just clawed back for themselves, instantly cleared out to allow the side laners to just keep pushing. Pushing. G2 are never being given this opportunity to group and make a fight happen. And now we know for sure that these side laners of H2K are guaranteed to win their 1v1s. So H2K literally just have to stop and wait. Level 16 for the Kassadin, level 16 for the Gnar. They are slowly going to end the game on the side lane. They just have to make sure that they do not fall into the trap of fighting G2 in a 5v5, because that Caitlyn is terrifying right now.
Absolutely. 3 item point now hit, waiting for a bit of armor penetration before she'll be able to kill everyone. But the more vulnerable targets of H2K, Febiven and Nuclear, definitely need to be scared. Odoamne, though, definitely a man who is not fearless as he continues to pressure in on the bottom side. And one of the things, Vedius, about 1-3-1 in Europe, I feel like a lot of teams have been struggling to execute it. Yes, H2K are starting off really well, but the vulnerability of this strategy just, if you make one mistake, 1-3-1 falls apart pretty quickly.
Oh, it certainly can, but so far H2K are playing this map beautifully. G2 really struggling to find answers. They haven't been able to successfully push that Weaver's Wall into a situation where H2K are suddenly forced to collapse. Maybe G2 can do it now with the Dragon spawning soon. Febiven going to go back to base. Wonder if he's got enough of the Zhonyas just yet. Because if he does, that's going to be a very big teamfight tool that's really going to help H2K even fight at this point in the game.
And Vedius, if you're hoping for a clean macro game, you're definitely getting it, because this is the fewest kills in a game. This split was 10. That's Mysterious Monkeys versus Roccat, and we're at 5, 28 minutes of the game, so well on the way to beating that record. However, H2K maybe looking to change that. Dragon in their sights. Jankos is going to go for the steal. PerkZ doing what he can to keep it disengaged. In goes the Mega Gnar. Trick going to grab it. Expect looking for the flag and drag to get him over. PerkZ not going to make it over the wall. No wall up to connect. But Tahm Kench is delivering to the fight. Now H2K maybe looking for a little bit more. Suddenly it starts off. Mithy going to find the disengage. Unbreakable going to block some of the damage. Zven throwing a little bit more over the wall, but no one's going to die! But
you're seeing now H2K being a confident team that's trying to force the fight. They feel confident enough that they can actually win that 5 versus 5, especially with how much was used to deny H2K from even getting to the Dragon. But now G2, they've lost all control over the Baron area. Odo, he has his TP up. H2K, though, they're not going to run the risk just yet.
Not backing everybody at the same time, one at a time, staggering them. Do not want to leave 1 or 2 members near the pit to get picked off and Baron to get taken down. Only a 1K lead for H2K, nothing massive. Double Infernal's definitely going to balance that out at this point in the game, especially with a Caitlyn and a Taliyah on that team. But G2 hungry for something, hoping to find a pick here. May not be able to catch Febiven, but Mithy has to be careful. Febiven going to give them the respect, not going to go for anything aggressive. And right now with the waves pushed against H2K, G2 have a small opportunity to get some deeper vision here, but it looks like instead they're going to back off, spend some of that gold that they earned, look to pick up a few more wards and a few more items.
So the game's still in full control of H2K. The amount of the amount of defensive vision that they have right now makes a lot of sense, because they know that they can't look to contest the vision around Baron. All they need to have good awareness of is what G2 is trying to do. And you can see Chei hanging around, just feeling it out. His spidey senses weren't tingling, so he decides not to drop a ward over the wall.
Is that the official analytical interpretation?
That is, in fact,
the spidey senses?
Yeah, it's one of those things, though, that you have with experience, right? When you play the game for so long, you can, like, read the map. You look at the situation, go, would they be rushing it? Well, H2K, they're going to fight.
Rushing for Trick. Trick gonna have to try to flash safety. Is stealthed up, so we'll make it out. Almost a pick there, but not going to get the jungler. That could have just been Baron for H2K if the jungler had dropped, but Trick not going to go down in the end.
I wanted to say that getting a flash is always great, but I feel like we see so many flashes and heals go down that have never really resulted in anything. All they've really done is spooked G2 a little, and they've also been able to get themselves the tier 2 tower in the bottom lane, as H2K look to continue the deep vision train.
And I'll be honest, it felt like an even game for so much of the mid game. Maybe a little G2 favored earlier on, but now it's definitely H2K favored. 3K. The double infernos for G2 are nice, but the split push is just working out so well for H2K, and anytime H2K find even the smallest advantage, it feels like G2 are giving up so much, whether it's tower health or a tower itself. G2, however, finding an opportunity to fire back. Varus not in position to clear the wave. That means mid-tier 1 all but guaranteed for G2, however, giving a lot of respect to Febiven. Jankos backing off. Odo, 70% to the Mega Gnar. Both teams playing so cautiously, so calm and collected, and this is kind of the level of discipline I think we were hoping for from both sides, but neither one with a decisive lead yet, even if H2K feels like they have the advantage.
But I feel like H2K now, they need to move Odo off onto top lane, so you can start pressuring down onto that tier 2, and you have Febiven move down to the bottom lane. His TP is still up. The Baron is extremely far away if you're in the bottom lane, funnily enough. So he'll be able to join the fray fairly quickly in the event that anything were to kick off. And I feel like we're a bit of a broken record here, just repeating the same things. H2K, they're continuing to play towards the 1-3-1. Great win condition for them, but it's really important to acknowledge that their team fighting is not weak. Varus, still a very potent team fighter. Gragas, really good at splitting up the enemy. Synergize that with the Varus ultimate, you have a great way to find a pick. Now, because H2K, they all had to go back to base, they're still sending up the side lanes, they will lose that mid-tier 1, but at this point in the game, it means nothing. 33 minutes, the value that that tower brings has already been maximized. Now G2, will they force a Baron play? It looks like it.
Moving for a bit more. Odoamne is stacking up the Fury, though. They have to be careful, but this one is getting burned down quite quickly. Trick and Expect dishing out decent damage. Sven on the backline as well. 3K and getting lower. Odoamne going forward. That's the Mega Gnar, but he's only going to connect on one. Sven's left untouched, has not been CC'd. The Weaver's wall breaking up the fight. Febiven moving forward, but PerkZ can hit up as much as he can. Chei trying to save the day, getting Odoamne out of there. Trick on the way out as well. Febiven finally going to find a kill. Jankos leaping forward. Where is the follow-up? Not going to get a kill. They're firing back. Expect actually going to take down Jankos. At the end of the day, still just a 1-for-1. Baron alive and well. No one is walking away with anything.
How does no one die in these fights? They're so close.
Chei. Make it taken down. Kassadin gonna get out. Nuclear's in trouble too. This is bad news for H2K. G2, they're gonna set their sights on that Baron. It may just be an easy take for the team.
And H2K, they get baited into the fight. They know they have to challenge G2 because the Baron is going down so quickly. But the way in which G2 played the fight was just so fantastic. The Weaver's wall from PerkZ, the positioning from Zven, the fact that Febiven could not get onto those key targets, and so many low health bars on the side of G2, yet no one died. Just fantastic execution that H2K ended up falling short.
And look at the confidence here from G2. They know the Caitlyn and the Jarvan can get this started, even if they need the Kha'Zix to help finish that smite to secure. Febiven is nearby, but Jankos is so far away. This is looking like a Baron for G2. No steal attempt coming in. G2 taking the first Baron of the game.
And now they have reclaimed the gold lead. They have the Baron, and trying to stop this 1-3-1 becomes so much easier when you can just run it down mid and force H2K to group. G2, a team you can never count out, but H2K historically have always struggled in these late game fights. So keep your eyes on Odo, right? He goes in, he gets the Mega Gnar. He fails to hit Trick, so the jungler is still alive. Yes, he gets a bit of CC down, but look at how great this wall is. Nuclear is not dealing any damage. Chei is forced to flash early on. Jankos' impact in this fight is little to nothing, while PerkZ and Zven are just kiting on the backline.
Oh, but Trick may be getting caught out. Baron buff's important, but not if you can push the waves. That's the first pick for H2K. Zven now the one in trouble. Mithy going to do what he can to save on the way in. Febiven looking for the kill. That's going to be it. Lead forward. Mithy next on the menu. H2K, they're firing back.
And they punish G2 as they're trying to set up the siege, but H2K, with their extremely mobile members and their ability to catch these targets out of position with the deep vision that they set up, they find the picks, they're going to mitigate the Baron, and they're going to run it down mid.
Ooh, and Trick was just not expecting that. Maybe lulled into that slow game sensor feeling, but H2K, despite the Baron buff, still willing to make those aggressive plays, and it's paying off. PerkZ can't even use that Baron buff to pressure. Is going to decide to stay debating whether or not to back. It's a 4-second back timer, knows the inhibitor's already dead. is going to look to push that tier 2 on the top side, but that inhibitor going down for H2K is the first very large advantage for either one of these teams.
Really want to see the setup from H2K because I love the fact that they didn't just concede. They didn't just let G2 have what they wanted. They found an opportunity and made the pick happen. This was just H2K. They tried to get some deep vision down. Trick has no idea that they've walked into the jungle, and he just gets caught off. Fantastic play from H2K, getting a great punish onto G2. They're all split up. G2, they haven't even grouped up mid because you have Taliyah trying to go clear up on the top lane. Everything just going so well for H2K. Finding a great punish.
And Vedius, you said, all right, Gust of Blows is great, but you have to hit the Kassadin. Braum did not get a single auto attack or Q onto that Kassadin in the fight. Febiven is looking untouchable. Maybe Mithy can change that here, but difficult game for G2. They still have a minute left on the Baron buff. The play happened so quickly after the Baron that they have an abundance of time left. Maybe they can get an objective back, even up the game once again.
Well, it's going to be difficult. Bear in mind that they've pushed out mid lane. As Trick and Elite putting a little bit of pressure down onto Jankos. Very tense, still very even from both sides. And now they're grouping up in the bottom lane.
Trying to zone out Weaver's wall. Letting Zven hit the tower uncontested, using it as a sieging tool. And that means tower should be able to drop in G2's favor, but Zven starting to back off, has to be careful, locked up immediately. The QSS is going to take it to safety. Keep your eyes on Odo. He's knocked up, but he's going to turn Mega in a moment. What can he do? Find a little bit of time. Wow, G2 just going to pick him off. Now Trick is on the hunt, leaping forward. Looking for a little bit more, trying to find the disengage. Flash forward from Mithy, concussive blows. Chei will get locked up. Will he get the chance to activate the thick skin? Buy himself a bit of time. He will, but the shield is decaying. Oh! Expect that's the start of the fight that they wanted. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Trick looking for a little bit more. Kills across the board. G2 may just be able to end it here.
Beautiful knockup from Expect, landing onto 3 members. G2 getting multiple kills, and with the Baron buff only now running out, they're looking to take game 1.
A lot of pressure on Febiven's shoulders, but one Kassadin is not enough. H2K may have fired back after that Baron, but G2 still found a way to put it to use, and Febiven spending a little extra time there in the fountain, contemplating exactly what went wrong for H2K, because at the end of the day, it was slow, it was steady, calm, and collected from both sides, but both teams have a bit of fun at the end of the day, but it's G2 who's going to come out on top with that win.
The PerkZ statement holds true. Deficio's haircut still in danger. They don't drop the game, they lead the series 1-0.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of things we can talk about during this series, but remember the first and most important is that Deficio's hair is in danger. Every hashtag H2K win vote is a vote for Deficio's hair.
Yeah.
But if you're like me, kind of want to see him get a haircut. But we have to say, very close, very even game for the vast majority. G2, though, doing very well.
What makes me really excited is, to me, we're not seeing like either team play really, really badly. Like, sure, there are very subtle mistakes, but they're like individual mistakes and really hectic fights. But as a team, so many good things coming out from both sides. The fact that G2 was super proactive in the early game. They really tried to shut down the Kassadin. They couldn't really do very much. But then, come the mid-game, H2K, they play the 1-3-1 extremely well. G2, they're forced into a corner, and they're like, now we have to fight you. They get a great fight, they execute upon it brilliantly, and it's just 2 really good teams battling it out, seeing which one can come out on top. And this time around, it was G2.
Definitely was. Coming back even after that loss to the fight in H2K. Well, G2 are off to a great start in this series. Here are Shocks and friends for more on their win.
Thank you very much, Drakos. I'd like to remind everyone of what Zven said in the intro video to this match. It will be 2 very slow games, and G2 will win them in the end. Well, my God, was he correct in this one, at least. There is still a lot to talk about, even though it was quite slow. We have what did here. So first thing I want to ask you about is obviously the bottom lane, and more specifically, before this game and after your match, we were talking a lot about how good Kalista is right now in any situation, but how Caitlyn is, for G2 and Zven specifically, a better pick. Why is that in relation to their style?
Because actually they know how to use Caitlyn, because if Caitlyn can push, he can just chunk tower really easily, and then they picked Taliyah at the same time, and then that means they can have mid priority really easily. That's why Trick did Ollie gank on mid, and then they slowly chunking tower, and then yeah, they have full river control on both sides, and then they have Ollie control.
And I want to touch on why mid priority relates so much to AD carries, because in the late game, we know it's going to be the Kassadin on one side, the Caitlyn on the other side. And if you can shut the Kassadin down and get the Caitlyn ahead, that's going to do wonders for G2 in the early game. And that's why we want to take a look at the early plays that Trick made into the middle lane. His first gank looks really weird because it's at level 2 and he just flashes in and goes, okay, now we're going to try and kill Febiven. But this already chunks through Febiven and his health potions. It pushes him back in lane and sets up for a repeat gank that actually gets his summoners. The whole point of doing this is so that you can constantly push mid and then roam up towards the top side or to the bottom side with PerkZ and get a kill. This was felt around the level 10 mark, a little bit later than G2 would have liked, but that's the entire reason why Trick spent so much time around mid side, because they were trying to push Febiven as far behind as possible.
Very interesting in relation to the bot lane pick as well. So, Henning, you have that Kassadin on the other side, which was the most important thing in this matchup. So how far do you need to put him behind to make sure that he can't do anything? It seems like it's never enough.
I mean, if you can't end the game before he's level 16, you're going to be pretty sad because he's just a ticking time bomb. Someone thought it was a good idea to put Driftwalk on a 2-second cooldown. So level 16, he's going to be really hard to deal with. So you really want to shut him down before that. And I think the champions that G2 picked up was... They could do that with the Caitlyn and the Taliyah, but it says a lot when they have these good sieging comp against the Kassadin who doesn't have any ranged wave clear, and they're still not able to get mid-tower until like 32 minutes or something.
It took very long, which made us all say here on the desk, G2, can you please do something? And what did I think you said? This is a very hard game not to win for H2K. So we wanted G2, you said it, YOLO at some point. But when you're in a game like that, that is so solid and you don't feel like you can make any moves, it is just hard to make the right decision, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's really hard when you have losing side lane, boss lane, and then also mid priority. But actually, they did right timing because they expect to just reaction to both sides, but actually just expect to go and play and go and engage. They made right play at the right place, and then that's why actually G2 turns the game and game on.
They do, and because of the dragon.
Yeah, from the dragon fight, we were talking a lot about side lane control and why G2 couldn't actually make a play. And when you do look at what they inevitably end up doing, they try and force a play with H2K. But the thing G2 are trying not to do, and the reason that it gets so slow, is because you don't want to give the Kassadin the kills. That's why in this first fight that we look at that eventually started up happening and not actually being a fight at all, G2 don't commit. They let H2K get the dragon and say, okay, we're just going to back away, because if you do give the Kassadin those kills, that's where all of that strength comes from, and they're desperately trying to get Zven to the point where they can actually carry the fight, which ends up happening after the Baron later.
You were saying what did over both replays, actually, that you think, not that much specifically in this one, but especially in the one that comes next with Baron, that H2K's kind of focus in the team fights seems to be a bit off.
Yeah, it's kind of really bad shot calling, I guess, because Odoamne actually focused on some in-fit play, but Febiven jump on their dealers, but actually not enough damage, and also Odoamne tried to kill it, and Jankos also tried to go in, but that's not enough. Just focus on one target and kill step by step, but actually they failed on shot
I guess
calling,
the idea is if everyone's low, Kassadin can kill everyone, but in the end, it turned all around for G2, and from this point on, they take over the game again.
Yeah, for sure, G2 able to come back in the end, even though the late game for H2K were so strong with the side lanes, with a 1-3-1. They have both the Gnar and the Kassadin, who are pretty much unstoppable in the 1v1s. The 5 versus 5 team fights are very strong for G2.
Frustrating game for H2K because when you look at kind of the playbook, you do everything correctly. Yeah. They focus your mid lane so hard, but you still manage to get the timer on your Kassadin. You put him in a side lane, your Gnar's 1v1ing the top laner, but in the team fight, you can't do it. What's this going to do to their confidence?
I think H2K's confidence is going to get rocked. I don't think it'll be so much that we won't see another slow game. I don't think they're going to go crazy on this one. I wanted to get Wadid's opinion because one of the things we were talking a lot was about the strength of Braum for G2 as well. Do you think that now in game 2 might be banned out by H2K? Is it worth it that much?
It's really hard to ban Braum because of some junglers and new champions in this meta. But maybe they can look for it because Braum is also... It's really complete champion for teamfight, so maybe, yeah.
Yeah, a strong pick for them, and it worked. G2, well, a winner here in Game 1. H2K in a tough position as they need to win to stay in the series. We'll see if they can strike back when we return.